Hello, James here from the 11 Plus Tutors. Today I'm going to talk to you about a foundational area for kids doing the 11 Plus that is pretty much guaranteed to be in the paper. And I always say to kids, if it's pretty much guaranteed to be in there, we may as well master it, we may as well become experts. And the good news is, for fractions, there are only 4 operations to learn. And I think the other piece of good news is, this one, adding, is the hardest one out of all of them. And once you master this, everything becomes subsequently easier. So let's start with this example here. Adding 2 fractions. And what most kids know is where they've got 2 bottom numbers the same, right? And they leave the bottom number alone. So it would be over 4. And they just deal with the top numbers, right? But we're not doing that. We are throwing something in there that's a bit more challenging, which is different bottom numbers. And this is something that kids will be covering at school in year 5. The problem is sometimes they don't cover it in enough depth, or they don't quite understand. So let's go through it now. What we need to do is have these 2 bottom numbers the same. And the way we achieve that is by finding equivalent fractions for these where the bottom numbers are the same. Then the result works out. What we need to do is find the lowest common denominator for both these numbers, the smallest number that both of these numbers will go into, and that happens to be 4. This is the bit that kids seem to struggle with. They don't seem to understand the smallest number that both of these will fit inside exactly. 2 will go inside 4 2 times, 4 will go inside 4 1 time. What we do, this is the other key thing to remember, what we do to the bottom, we do to the top. I mean, you could argue there's no real point doing this, but I'm doing it for the sake of showing you. So, we end up here now with, instead of 1, it's 2, because it's 1 times 2, 2 times 1 is 2. And that equals 4 over 4, which equals 1 whole 1. So, and that makes sense because 2 quarters really is a half, and a half plus a half is a whole 1, so it makes common sense. Now, like I said, once you've learned add, you've actually also learned subtract. So with subtract, what we do is we look at the bottom numbers, we do the same thing. Lowest common denominator of these is 4 again. Don't forget to put the right operator there, it's subtract. What do we do to this? We times it by 2 to get the equivalent fraction. We must do the same to the top and bottom. So we end up with this. And this equals 5 over 4. Now, I always say to kids, what's wrong with this? And what's wrong with this is the top number is bigger than the bottom number. We call it an improper fraction, or top heavy. How many times does the bottom number go into the top number? Once. So we get 1 whole 1 out of it. And what's left over? 1 1/4. Next thing, so that's the hard bit. For multiply, it's actually really easy. All it is this. You just solve this, and that would be 2 over 12. Now, we would say to kids, what's wrong with that? Well, there's a number that goes into 2 and 12. It's 2. It goes in 1 and 6. But what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you something else called cross-cancelling. And this is something, again, a bit like long division. You don't have to know how to do it, but it helps. If you look on a diagonal, and it only works on diagonals, is there a number that could go into both? Well, 2 goes into 2 and 4. It goes once and twice. So we've simplified it. We cancelled it down. Is there a number that goes into 1 and 3? Well, 1 does. It's the same thing, so don't bother. Now we end up with a much easier sum of 1 times 1 is 1. 3 times 6 is 6. Can you see we've actually jumped out the cancelling down bit? It actually makes things easier. It reduces the big numbers that we have to deal with. Very useful. Now this one, I always say to kids, it's so weird. And once you know that, you know this, believe it or not, because this is so strange, it's easy. KFC, kids can remember KFC. A nice brand for you there. Kick, flip and change. We leave the first fraction alone. We change it to a multiply, we treat it like a multiply, and strangely we just invert this, we flip this upside down so it becomes 10 over 2. Now what I've done here is I've left numbers where we could cross cancel. Again, what goes into 5 and 10 across the diagonal? 5 does, 1 and 2. What goes into 2 and 4? 2 does, it goes 1 and 2. Now we end up with 2 times 2 is 4, over 1 equals 4 whole ones. Obviously I've done this really quickly, but possibly you could use it for further reference. I hope you've really enjoyed this. We've been doing this recently with the Year 5s just to make sure that the groundwork's there. A lot of them are doing this at school at the moment. I hope you enjoyed that. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Goodbye.